back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Roach Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports cons. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. The 2023 college football season is less than 50 days away, and we're going to be seeing a lot of great offenses and defenses this year. It's going to be so much fun to watch. But one team that might not have a great offense, but it should be improved from the abysmal season they had on the offensive end last year, is the Iowa Hawkeyes. They're a really interesting team because Iowa every single year goes around 8-4. That has been the mantra. During the Kirk Ferentz era, he's Mr. 8-4, and that Iowa is a very reliable football team to always have pretty solid years. They're never going to be a threat to make the college football playoff or make the national championship game, but they're never really a team that you're expecting to go under 500 and have an awful season either. But there's another thing about Iowa that makes them a similar team to watch every year, is that their defense, led by defensive coordinator Phil Parker, is always great every single season, bordering on elite. They've had top 5 defenses in the past, and last year their defense was elite with cornerback Riley Moss, and they had linebacker Jack Campbell as well. Both those players are gone to the NFL. They do have some good defensive players back this season, and we'll get to those guys as we look at the roster for Iowa for next season. But Iowa's defense, if it wasn't good last year, then there's no way the Hawkeyes would have been a team that would have made a bowl game. Their offense was abysmal. They were the worst team in the Power 5 on offense last season by far. They even had a game against South Dakota State where they won by 2 safeties and a field goal. They beat them 7-3 in that game. Again, the Hawkeyes defense was great, but their offense could not get anything going at all. Spencer Petras is gone. He was their quarterback last season, and maybe with a new quarterback and transfer from Michigan, Cade McNamara, the offense could be better. But if the Hawkeyes had a good offense, they could be a great team, because their defense the last 10 years with Phil Parker, who's been the defensive coordinator since 2013 at Iowa, it's been great every single season. Their defense allows the Hawkeyes to be a solid team and to win a lot of games in the Big Ten. But when they play teams with better offenses, they can't stand a chance because their offense cannot keep them in the game. And Iowa's going to have to get better at offense if they ever want to be able to compete at the top of the Big Ten again once the divisions go away in 2024, because you're adding USC and UCLA, and Iowa could get left in the dust behind Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Wisconsin, USC, and UCLA, and they just won't be able to compete with those teams at the top. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Iowa in the future. Can they break the mold of being the team that some people were saying didn't even deserve to have the O in their name? They were just calling them Iowa. There was no O in it because there's no offense, but Iowa should be better on offense this year. But despite what's going to happen in the future for the Hawkeyes in the Big Ten, we're just focusing on the 2023 season. What do I think that the Hawkeyes will achieve in 2023? Will it be 8-4 as always, or could they be better or worse this season? Again, I've already mentioned Cade McNamara. He's the quarterback transfer from Michigan. He's a solid quarterback. You look at his stats at Michigan, they don't light the world on fire, but he gets the job done. He doesn't throw too many picks. He doesn't throw too many touchdowns as well. He probably needs to be more dynamic. He can run a bit, but he does not scramble that much. But I do think that Cade McNamara does provide more in the offense than Spencer Petras could ever provide, because Spencer Petras was unfortunately a statue. He just could not move at all. And since Iowa's offense was so predictable, running the ball on first and second down all the time in passing situations, it made Spencer Petras a sitting duck in the pocket, and there was nothing that he could do. But Cade McNamara probably will be a bit more dynamic and will help in that regard. Iowa does have some solid running backs coming back. Caleb Johnson and LaShawn Williams, they're 2 running backs that were with the Hawkeyes last year. They're going to be a year older, especially Caleb Johnson. He's only a sophomore. He was great as a freshman last year. He should get even better. Nico Regani's back at wide receiver, and Luke Lachey and Eric All are both at tight end for the Hawkeyes. Eric All used to play for the Michigan Wolverines. He transferred as well to Iowa because Cade McNamara left. So that's going to be good for the offense to have a tight end and a quarterback that are already familiar with each other at their previous stop. But the big key is Brian Ferentz. Brian Ferentz, the son of Kirk Ferentz, who's been the offensive coordinator for the last few seasons. He gets a lot of flack for people saying that he does not do his job well and that he does not allow the Hawkeyes to have success in the offensive end. But you got to look at as well that Iowa has not had a top 60 offense since 2007. So it's not like Brian Ferentz suddenly made Iowa's offense a lot worse. It's just the fact that whatever respectability Iowa did have on the offensive end before Brian Ferentz became the offensive coordinator, he was just the tight end and offensive line coach, it definitely got a whole lot worse. At least when Iowa had Nate Stanley at quarterback back in the day, and even previous quarterbacks before that, Iowa was able to put up points at times in games. Even if their offense was in the 70s or 80s or even 90s in the ratings among all the teams in college football, Iowa still was slightly respectable. Last year, Iowa had the worst offense in the Power 5, as I mentioned earlier. It was terrible, and Brian Ferentz needs to find a way, especially with the talent they have in Cade McNamara at the quarterback position, Nico Reganey at wide receiver, Luke Lachey, Eric All at tight end. They need to utilize the passing game more, and especially on first and second down, so it's not becoming a predictable offense of running on first and second down and then only throwing on third down, and then you have a 3 and out. So if Brian Ferentz can do a bit better of a job at that with this extra infusion of talent that the Hawkeyes have brought in through the portal, and with their returning guys getting better, Iowa's offense could improve from one of the worst in the Power 5 to maybe in the middle, probably still not a top 60 offense, but it could be better, and that could allow the Hawkeyes to have an even better year. The defense is going to be solid again. They are losing a lot of guys. Like I said, Jack Campbell, Riley Moss are gone, but they do have Cooper DeJean back at cornerback, Nick Jackson at linebacker, and Logan Lee at defensive tackle, so those are going to be guys that are really experienced. They've been on the defensive side of the ball for many years. They've been learning behind the greats that Iowa's had on that side of the ball, and they have a lot of younger guys that are only going to get better and better. And again, Phil Parker, one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. Iowa needs to take advantage of having him while they do, because once Iowa loses Phil Parker, if he ever leaves for a head coaching job or maybe another job in general, maybe he won't, but if he does leave, Iowa could really fall apart if the offense doesn't get better once their defense isn't as good as it is right now. Iowa's defense has been a spectacle to watch for years. They are great on that side of the ball, and Phil Parker is a big reason why. They also have Drew Stevens at kicker and Tory Taylor at punter. Tory Taylor, one of the infamous names of the Iowa Hawkeyes team, because of the fact that he's utilized so much for his punting ability, because Iowa has to punt so much. He's a great punter, and a lot of people are saying, even on College Game Day, that he was the MVP of the whole entire team. I would still give that to someone on the defense, but Tory Taylor is a really good punter that will have a great shot to play in the NFL one day. And now we finally get to Iowa's 2023 football schedule. It's not just about having a really solid team on both sides of the ball. It's also about your schedule, because the tougher the schedule, no matter how good you are, it makes it harder to win games. If you have an easier schedule, sometimes you can win more games even if you're not that good. But I'm looking at Iowa's schedule, and it has a lot of tricky games. They don't have a lot of games where you look at the team they're going to be playing and say that Iowa has no chance, and they don't have a lot of games that Iowa is going to play where they're just going to easily win as well. So it's a very tricky schedule. A lot of games that they could slip up in, but also a lot of games that offer Iowa the possibility and chance to win a big game as well. They start the season with Utah State. You would think that would be a win. The Aggies are solid in the Mountain West, but Iowa should be favored there as long as their offense gets the job done with Cade McNamara in week 1. In week 2, you have at Iowa State. Really tough game right there, because Iowa did lose to the Cyclones last season because their offense was horrible. But if their offense is a bit better, and especially because Iowa State has not been playing like they were a few years ago, and they have Brock Purdy, Breece Hall, and Charlie Kolar with Matt Campbell at head coach, they have not been the same team. So if Iowa can just do a good job on both sides of the ball, they should be able to get revenge on their rivals, you would think, more than likely. Then they have Western Michigan at home. If they win all 3 of these games, that will set up Iowa really well for that at Penn State game on CBS at night in Happy Valley. That's going to be an extremely tough game. This is probably the only game where Iowa does not have a great chance to win. Iowa could win this game, but it will be very tough for them to get the job done there. So you would think more likely that will be a loss, but not an impossible game for Iowa. Then they have Michigan State and Purdue at home. If Iowa's going to be a really solid team this year, they should win both of these games. Michigan State is not looking as good lately, and Purdue, they have a first-year head coach, so it's going to be tough for both of those teams. Then they have at Wisconsin. That's a really tough game, even though Wisconsin has a first-year head coach. Cam Randall's always tough to play against. They're rivals, and you also have Luke Fickell at head coach. He's a great coach as well. It should be a tough game. Then they have Minnesota, their other rival as well. Minnesota is a tough team. PJ Fleck always gets his team ready to play, but Iowa is a great team at home. This is in Kinnick Stadium, so that should help out the Hawkeyes against the Golden Gophers. Then they have Northwestern at home. We've already discussed what's going on with Northwestern. Pat Fitzgerald is out. The program is a mess. You would think that would help Iowa win that game. Then they have Rutgers at home and Illinois at home. Rutgers you think would be easier than the Illini, but Rutgers still isn't a complete pushover. In Illinois, they were a team that played a dogfight of a game with Iowa and was able to win, and Brett Bielema definitely has them playing much better football, despite the fact that they are losing Tommy DeVito, Chase Brown, and a couple of their great defensive players as well. So Iowa, you think, would have a good chance to win that one, but it's not an easy game as well. Then they have at Nebraska, and again, like with Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, you have Matt Rule in his first year as the Nebraska head coach. It's going to be a really tough game. It's on Black Friday. It's one of the newest rivalries in the Big Ten, Iowa and Nebraska. They've been having some great games, and as always, Memorial Stadium in Lincoln is a tough place to play. So Iowa could trip up at Nebraska, but it's also a game that they could definitely win. looking at the schedule, I think the ceiling for the Hawkeyes is 10-2. I think they could go 10-2. You can make an argument 11-1 with just a loss to Penn State, but I think there's just too many games that they could slip up in, like at Wisconsin and possibly at Nebraska or versus Illinois at home, and I think it's going to make it very difficult for them to go 11-1, but you never know. I think that their ceiling is 10-2. Their floor is 6-6. If the offense does not get off the ground, if Brian Ferentz just is not able to work with Cade McNamara, there's no improvement on the offensive end, and the defense just is not as good as last year with all the great players that they had, and they can't bail them out. I could see Iowa slipping up in 6 of these games and going 6-6, still making a bowl game. But as always, I'm going to go with the 2023 record prediction for the Iowa Hawkeyes. I'm going with 8-4, and I know some people will probably be frustrated with that prediction because, yes, Iowa went 8-5 last year, and I did call Kirk Ferentz Mr. 8-4, that he always goes reliably 8-4 every single year. And if Iowa is supposed to be better this year with a new quarterback, Cade McNamara, maybe Brian Ferentz runs a new scheme on offense to be able to actually utilize the attributes of his new players, Iowa should be better than this. But still, I think with a new quarterback, Cade McNamara, and a defense that has some question marks, they have a really solid defense still with the great players, but there's going to be a lot of new faces as well. Can Phil Parker get them to play as well as they did last year? Because if Iowa did not have as good of a defense as they did last year, they could have went 6-6. They were able to bail themselves out in a few games, specifically that Minnesota game last year, just because of their defense. So I do think that Iowa's going to go 8-4 again. I think there's too many games that they can slip up in, and even though I do think overall Iowa will be a better football team in 2023 on paper, I still feel like they're going to go 8-4. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Iowa football in 2023. I'm looking forward to potentially seeing a better offense with the Hawkeyes, and we'll have to see how good the defense is going to be. Should still be really solid with a lot of tricky games, a lot of question marks with the Hawkeyes. It's always reliable to go back to 8-4 with the Iowa Hawkeyes. That's the record that they have the most often, and I feel like that's the record they'll have again in 2023. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below what you think about the 2023 Iowa football schedule and whether you think that the Hawkeyes will go 8-4 or if you think they'll have a better or worse record, and how good of a job you think that the Iowa offense and defense will be this year in college football. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I will see you next time.